Thank you. Very nice to see everybody in here. It's my first time, so we'll see how it goes. But happy to be here. My name is Collin Lenon. I am with ClickUp, and I'll be talking a little bit about some tips and tricks that we've used to help scale our DBT project through some stages of hypergrowth. So right off the bat, I am the presenter today. I am on the data platform team at ClickUp. Essentially, we have a couple of analytics teams. Our data platform team, we kind of sit under our data org, and I'll explain that a little bit better as we kind of get going. But I, right now, live in North Carolina, on the west side of North Carolina. Grew up in that area, moved away for a little bit, doing college and some other things, and then kind of moved back to North Carolina just recently. So that's where I'm sitting, kind of in the Charlotte area, if anyone's familiar, and that's where I'm at. So let's jump into it. So talking today, we'll do some introductions, talk a little bit about myself, my journey, real quick, and then we'll jump into a little bit about ClickUp and how far we've come and set the stage a little bit for what we've done to get here. Next, we'll set the stage, help to see what growth has looked like for ClickUp up to this point as of a couple years ago. So that'll be a lot of fun, and then we'll jump into a little bit of some solutioning, some things that we've implemented specifically within our CI/CD pipeline to help us sustain that growth and help us stay on top of things as all the requests and the different things come in as a company scales. Lastly, we'll talk a little bit about the key takeaways and where we can go from here. So let's do it. Let's talk about myself. So I'm Collin. Here's how I got to where I am today. So a couple years ago, graduated from BYU, college out in Utah. I studied information systems and then did a graduate degree in management information systems. So talking all about anything from project management to software engineering to data analytics, data engineering, kind of encapsulated all of those different things, and then you can kind of specify which path you wanted to go into at that point. So that's the college I came from. And then from there on, I went and worked for a company called Route, basically a package protection shipping company. And I was a data analyst there, did some analytics engineering work. They were pretty small, about 100-ish employees at the time. So worked on kind of building a smaller company at that point, sustaining specifically our customer support organization. And then from that point on, I wanted to get a feel for kind of the entire data pipeline. So I left Route, did some consulting work at a couple different companies, did some data entry work, and then did some full stack data pipeline work actually at a cookie shop up in Seattle. So I went up to this shop. A friend of mine from Facebook, he had left Facebook, had bought this cookie shop and wanted to experiment with bringing tech into like the bakery industry, into an industry that hadn't really experienced tech all that much up to that point. And so brought me in. There was really no data infrastructure or anything set up. So brought me in to kind of build out the data infrastructure, everything from ingestion from your sources to transformation to visualization, even down to kind of machine learning, time series, forecasting model type of stuff. So I kind of got a feel for the entire pipeline at that point. And then right around there is the time I moved to ClickUp because I wanted to experience a company who was getting ready to move into hypergrowth and apply some of the skills I learned there. So I joined ClickUp as a data analyst. Soon after that, wanted to move further back into the pipeline to analytics engineering. And that's where I've sat for the past couple years at ClickUp now. So that's where we've been. What is ClickUp and what do we do? So I want to talk a little bit about this. ClickUp, we basically an everything app for work. Just recently released like a chat feature. So overall, we're a project management solution. That's where we started, and we've kind of grown out to be a little bit more than that for small to medium-sized businesses. So anything project management to docs, to Excel sheets, to chat, any of those types of things is what we like to do at ClickUp. So we'll go on from there. Let's talk a little bit about ClickUp's growth journey. So ClickUp up to this point has grown pretty quickly. Founded in 2017, all the way to where we are now. You can see this curve of growth really started to kick off in 2022 and kind of get to where we are now. So I'll talk about a few different stages of growth and things that we've done at these different stages. But some will be in the first couple years, and then we'll jump to 3 to 5 years, and then from 5 years plus, we'll talk a little bit about what we've done in those different stages. So data at ClickUp, specifically what our data team looks like. We are a centralized data team at this point for now. We are all under a VP of data, and we have a couple different teams within that data org. We have a product analytics team, we have a marketing analytics team, we have a data science team, we have a revenue analytics team, And then we have our data platform team, which kind of liaisons out to all of those different types of teams, and we support them in model building and analyses and those types of things. Within the data platform team, we have data engineers and we have analytics engineers. And so that's where we sit, basically helping those analytics teams to have the infrastructure and set up the things they need to help their external stakeholders in different organizations. And so let's set the stage by looking at ClickUp's growth journey over time. So jumping into it, I want to paint a picture for what we've seen as successful growth and what that looks like over time from a company who has scaled from 100 employees to 1,000 employees in just a couple years. So it's been pretty quick. I joined ClickUp specifically in 2021. We were about 150 to 200 employees, and we just recently breached 1,000 employees. So over the past 3 years, we've grown 800 to 900 employees, and it's been pretty hectic, and we've had to kind of roll with the punches there. So I'm going to talk about some of the priorities that we thought about, the trade-offs we took at the different times, and so I'll explain what that looked like at ClickUp over time. I know that can look different for different companies depending on where you're at, whether you're a large enterprise or whether you're a small company still going through your funding stages. I think that can look really different at different times. So keep that in mind as we kind of go through this. This is ClickUp's experience, particularly my experience at ClickUp and how I've seen it. So take these as tips that can be helpful, but not doctrine that every company should go by for sure. So I'll set the stage for some of the pieces of tech and the way we use DBT at those times in our points of evolution. So jumping into the first stage. So right off the bat, we'll talk a little bit about what ClickUp was looking like. It's kind of soon when I got into ClickUp, slightly before. This is where we were at. This is the time of life we were in. The style we were going for is ship and iterate as fast as possible. So we were wanting to move, go very quickly, get things out the door, because our mindset at the time was growth, growth, growth. Let's grow as quick as possible. That's how companies gained valuation at that point, is by growing as quick as you could and getting products out to market. And so the company priority at that time was hire. Like get everybody we can, all hands on board. We have so much work to do. Let's knock all of this out of the park as quickly as we can. The data team strategy at that point was rapid product delivery. We wanted to get models out. We wanted to get dashboards out. At that point, it was like 80% is good enough. Like that's where we want to be. If you're at 80%, let's get it out, and we can iterate on that going forward. The org at this time was 1 to 2 years old. We were still in our baby years, 100 to 125 employees throughout those couple years, and we had about 5 data team members. So pretty small data team, had a couple members there, and that included managers, all those types of things. So we had a couple engineers, an analyst, and some managers at that point. So that's kind of the phase that we were in. We were trying to just get things going, trying to set the guardrails and build that foundation. So let's set the context a little bit with this. This is when tech was really booming. This was when tech was just taking off. Valuations were being given. VCs were throwing money out the door, and we were just kind of rocking and rolling. So let's jump to the second stage of ClickUp here. So in this stage, this was, for context, this is kind of when, right before kind of going into the 2020 COVID era. And so as we saw with COVID, a lot of things went remote, and then the next year or two after that, things really started to slow down. We started to see some layoffs. We started to see some cutbacks. And so at this point, we were still kind of in the mindset of like, hey, let's build quick, but also let's think about costs. Like, what do those things cost? What are we looking at here? And so that was kind of the company motto at that point, is like, let's grow, let's keep growing, but let's think about what we're doing. As a data team, we had to take that into consideration of like, let's kind of balance what we're doing. We need to take a step back. We need to really focus on where we're actually providing value to the business at. And as you can see, this is the breakdown of ClickUp where we were at that point. A couple more data team members that we were getting into that point. And we wanted to really focus on providing that value. So jumping into stage 3. At this point, COVID was effectively over. We were moving into the stages of, okay, things are settling down. We're getting back on our feet. Where do we want to go from here? And at this point, it's like, okay, for ClickUp specifically, we're thinking about IPO, thinking about when we want to do those things and move to the next step. So let's be really, really efficient with what we have. And so keeping hiring slow, but only hiring where we essentially need to. And moving forward from there. As a data team, we wanted to optimize the things that we're doing. We want to ensure data integrity, and this is really where we sit right now. is we're big enough to a point where your data has to be accurate, your numbers can't be changing all the time. You need to be thinking about how that plays into IPOing it at some point in the next couple of years. And so numbers are being looked at a lot. You need to make sure that the infrastructure is in place to support those types of things. So that's kind of where we sit right now. We moved from essentially, while tech was booming, where tech was slowing down a little bit, and now where tech is staying stable, trying to get out of the down state that we were in for the past little bit. So what did we learn through these stages? So as ClickUp, we learned as we kind of went from 100 to 1,000 employees, don't be seen as a cost center. I know this it's kind of where every data team sits to begin with. It's like you're bringing on data engineers, you're bringing on analysts, you're bringing on analytics engineers at some point, if your company has went down that path or not. Some may not. I'm sure that's why a lot of you are here, is to see what kind of value roles like that bring to a company. So at the point where your data team is created, you've got to find a unique way to change your data team from being a cost center with all of the tools that you use, all of the queries that you're building, all the compute that you're using on your warehouse. How do you turn that from being not only just cost, but also to providing value and helping your business to change the mindset of, hey, only thing data does is take money from us. How can we see them as a way that they're providing value to us and helping us to gain money and gain valuation? Secondly, data must equal growth proactively. This is a little bit of an interesting one, and it's probably one of the hardest ones, I'd say. Excuse me. How can you use data to effectively, in somewhat of a way, run your business? So it's like, how can we use data proactively, not having data as a second thought, having data as a forethought, something that helps businesses to make decisions. And I think a lot of what comes with that is establishing your data integrity, establishing your data accuracy, those types of things. So a lot of people say it's really easy to lose trust. It's a lot harder to gain trust, and I think that follows with data as well, not just in life in general. So it's a little bit of an interesting point. Lastly, becoming a growth engine using dbt in your data stack. So a lot of what I'm going to talk about today is how we can enable and use dbt to help us to do this. And so how can our tech stacks enable us to do this and to be growth engines? So I think the first thing is being realistic about your needs. What does your company need at the time? You probably, at the beginning, don't need a very perfect dbt project. You don't need documentation for every single column or every single model that you can think of. I think you just need to kind of work where you're at, build where you're at, and kind of iterate from there. Because essentially that was us in the beginning, is we needed to move quick. We chose which models we wanted to take the time to document. Same thing with columns, those types of things. And then number two, changing your mindset. I think it's really easy as an analytics engineer to get in the mindset of, how do I build really cool things? And I can build really cool things with the things that I have. I think we need to change our mindset from that to, how can I address key challenges? And I think what comes along with that is really cool things being built. So I think that's something I sat back and looked and said, hey, this is something that not only we tried to do, but we could have done better throughout the stages of growth, is changing from building cool things to addressing those key challenges. So let's jump into to our solutioning and how we can set ourselves up for success. So I want to jump into some practical tips for scaling dbt. Like I said, we'll want to build where we're at. So I think it's important not to put too much pressure on ourselves to build the perfect system or build the perfect application for a company and what they can use at that point. You start with where you're at, and then you can kind of iterate from there. So whether that be dbt cloud only, whether that be dbt core only, or whether that be a hybrid of both. And I think a hybrid can really be a sweet spot for a long time to come. And that's what I've seen for us here at ClickUp specifically. So at a high level, I want to talk a little bit about, for those who are very, very new to dbt, there may be some of those here, it may be most of you. But I think it's important to touch on this a little bit. But a high level for creating a dbt project, you'll have to create your cloud account, obviously. Jump into creating just a project in general. You're going to have a data warehouse integration, so whether that be Snowflake, it's something that we use at ClickUp. Whether that be, whatever database warehouse you use, you have to integrate that. Your code repository integration, so that you can create and commit code to that repository so the dbt can read and understand that. Configuring your environment, so you'll need to help dbt understand what you want to be prod, what you want to be dev, and whatever you want your testing or CI/CD environment to be from that point. And then from there, you can create and push code. dbt Cloud does a great job of helping you get up and running really, really quickly. And that's one reason why we started using dbt Cloud right off the bat at ClickUp, is because we could get up and running very, very quickly. So there's Cloud. Jumping into a little bit about Core, there are a couple extra things you'll need to run dbt Core. You'll need to install some dependencies. You'll need to create your local profiles that are done for you in dbt Cloud. And then similar to before, you'll pull down the code repo and then create and push code up. So a couple extra things for Core that you'll have to do manually that Cloud does for us. So let's jump into how ClickUp has evolved over time through those different stages. And then let's jump into some actual things that we've done. So at the beginning, more money and hurdling barriers to entry meant a gradual move towards a hybrid environment. So right off the bat, ClickUp started in cloud. Everybody on cloud, let's get up and running. Let's get things out the door. So that's where we were. And then as we got cost conscious, we started moving a little bit towards cloud, started taking some of those licenses and saying, hey, what can we develop locally to help us save a little bit of money and continue to iterate quickly? And so that was kind of the second stage of growth and why we chose to use that piece of dbt for that time. And then lastly, kind of where we're at right now is a fully hybrid dbt environment. So we use cloud for a lot of really good things like orchestration, exploration, observability, those types of things. But we also have team members who are developing and iterating inside of dbt Core. And we feel like that's a really good sweet spot for us because dbt does a lot of the heavy lifting for us. And then we can get pretty custom inside of the development and dbt Core features that we're using at this point. And that's worked for us as a 1,000-person company. It works really well. Sitting at about 25 to 30 data team members at this point, it's been really great for us. So the flexibility has allowed us to iterate quickly as we see. So let's jump into it. Let's jump into talking about some of the themes that we saw. So in the first stage, it's basically setting up some guardrails. We wanted to kind of have things in place so that we don't go astray down the line. And this is also looking back because hindsight is 20/20 in a lot of cases. And I know we didn't do things perfectly, but looking back, these are some of the things that I wish we would have thought about or thought about more, and things I think that would be good to think about for others moving forward. So stage 1, setting guardrails. Stage 2, building the foundation for what you're going to build during hypergrowth stages and how you're going to scale a lot of these things. In stage 3, exploring and branching out a little bit. So as we're in kind of the efficiency stages right now, we're working to be really efficient, and with that, I think can come some really cool solutions to the things that you'd already built in the past. So I think it's important to think about the context and the instability of the tech industry as you think about where your company's going and kind of where we've come from and the decisions that we made at that point, because things have definitely changed a lot in the past 3, 4, 5 years. So let's jump into some actual tips and recommendations. In stage 1, as you're setting these guardrails, I think it's important to have some sort of style guide out there. Because if you don't, you're going to continually add on team members to your teams. It's going to grow from 1, 2, 3, all the way up to 10, 15, 20 employees. And if they all have different styles of writing SQL, which I'm sure every single person does, then it's going to get pretty heavy in terms of tech debt. So right off the bat, looking back, I wish we would have created a SQL style guide so that things were just in place, kind of going from that point. So without this, I'm sure you can imagine, and I'm sure some of you experienced what that looks like. So second piece of that, some sort of PR process and template. So I think this is really helpful in setting the guardrails for what your project is going to look for as you begin to transition your focus to other things. So these are really, really things to add in the beginning, slightly harder things to add in the middle because you're going to have tech debt that you're going to have to go back and adjust. And you're welcome to scan this QR code. This has an example of what a PR template file would look like. You add this right into your .github directory inside of your dbt project, and it automatically fills out the description for you when you open up GitHub or open up a PR. So it's really nice in that way. We have a little bit of documentation that talks about that, and that's helped us quite a bit. So lastly, in stage 1, I would suggest some sort of testing for standards for data testing. This is something that we tried to implement at ClickUp, and I think it really, really helped us, because in the stages we're at now, this is completely essential. Your data has to be accurate. You can't have conflicting financial reports, looking at your ARR throughout the year, and those types of things. So it's important to set these from the ground level moving forward. And I think dbt has a lot of really great out of the box testing that you can do. And I think that's probably enough for this stage. If you want to go a little bit more advanced, want to do some anomaly testing and those types of things on your data, we really like Metaplane. Metaplane does a good job of helping us to test our data in that way, observe kind of what's going on. There are others out there like Monte Carlo and other tools I'm sure you've heard about that do really good at this type of stuff. And dbt has also actually been releasing a lot of good observability things lately that can also be helpful, especially for those early stages. So there's a lot of good stuff there. Jumping into stage 2. So this is the point where we were trying to kind of scale back, think about the cost, understanding what we were doing with a lot of the time that we had, and I think it's important, almost essential at this stage to implement state deferral if you're moving towards dbt core. So dbt cloud and dbt cloud CLI implement a lot of this for you, but if you're scaling back or moving to dbt core in any way, this is almost essential. This is basically a way to help you build data models without having to have like a development environment, have a clone or a copy of an entire production database. This essentially just references your production database automatically as you build development models, and it makes it really, really quick. You can implement, really all it takes is some environment variables inside of your local profile and a little bit of an understanding of how it works, and then you can simply just run dbt select state modified, and it'll basically run anything inside of your development environment that is modified, or you can choose specific models to run. So basically helps you to iterate a lot quicker and take a lot of the overhead off from developing. So step 2, something that we've tried and have experimented with is environment-based filters, and these work really well for certain use cases. It's not a one-size-fits-all for these types of things, but they do work well in certain use cases where you want to test and iterate and build models very quickly on subsets of data. Second, we tested with kind of a unique thing that we like to refer to as like bypass configs. And so essentially what we do is we specify a specific database and schema for models to get built into, and we do this specifically with incremental models. So incremental models that are really, really big, like event-based data. So we have a lot of events that come from Amplitude, and we actually do this with this specific model, but whenever we build against this model or make iterations, we actually bypass to the production database, so that if you're like running things in dev or you're testing things out, when you run these incremental models, it doesn't have to rebuild a lot of these from scratch. It basically just kind of iterates on top of what's already there, and then you can move from there. Very, very simple, I don't know if I should say simple, but understandable incremental logic that I'm sure a lot of you have dealt with so far. And that's really helped us up to this point. So let's jump into stage 3. These are where a couple unique things and things where we've tried to branch out a little bit and find some unique solutions to issues that we were having. One main solution to an issue we were having is we had teammates in core. We have a couple in cloud, and we had an issue where teammates in core were running PRs, running PR checks. They would kick off a PR check in dbt, but they were fully on cloud or fully on core. So they didn't have an option to go to dbt and see when like a model failed that was testing inside dbt. So they get the failure notification in the PR, but they'd have to reach out to somebody with a cloud license to actually know what that failure was. So we created a solution, kind of a custom solution here, and I wanted to kind of go a little bit, think outside of the box here and show you guys something that's probably not done every day, or probably not something that comes to mind immediately, but something unique that we've done here that's been a good solution for us. And so gave it a little example of a GitHub action here that we've set up to do this, some of the steps, and happy to connect with anybody if they're interested on how to do this more specifically. But that's kind of what we've done, and what that looks like is this inside of a PR. So a GitHub action will run, it'll hit the dbt API, it'll pull a lot of these run results down locally, and then print these out inside of a PR so that the person who runs dbt core can actually see these results inside of a PR. So right at the top, we have a commit SHA, we have a job link, you can click right into dbt, the duration, the status, run results, all of those types of things that you would see in dbt that are really helpful. We also added a cool little addition here that shows models that are actually being removed in the PR automatically generate those drop statements right here and toss them in. And then here are the actual failures that you'd see in dbt cloud, very similarly format. You can see them right here. So the status, the query ID, and then the message for that failure. So kind of a cool solution that was built to sustain those people who are on core, help them to iterate quicker without having us as a roadblock. Secondly, we've created a flow through GitHub Action to store the production manifest in our repo. I know there have been some people at dbt, some solution engineers who have built flows like this. Very similarly, we thought this is very helpful, especially if you're using state and deferral locally. This can be super helpful. So we essentially, on GitHub merge, after the job is complete, we'll hit the dbt API, pull down the manifest, commit that to our repo, so that we can then reference that locally when we develop later on. So that's been a really good flow for us to be able to to use state and deferral in an effective way. So there's an example of what that looks like and then kind of where it sits inside of our project there at the bottom. Lastly, something kind of interesting that was very low overhead, pretty easy to implement is an automatic labeler. So something that we don't think about a lot, but that can take some time, depending on your workflows, is adding labels to your PRs. Some may do it, some may not, but we have status labels for what's going on with the PR at what time and when somebody should be reviewing the PR and when they shouldn't. So we basically have a GitHub action to kind of pull down the status of a GitHub or of a GitHub PR from the GitHub API, understand what's going on with it, and then assign a label based on certain logic so that we can know what's happening with that PR at a certain time. So all of that's done automatically. We don't ever have to think about adding labels to our PRs or anything like that. So that's been another tip or another solution that's been really helpful for us to kind of take away some of that manual work and allow us to really focus on what's going to provide value for our company moving forward in terms of building models or setting up dashboards or whatever that may be. So what can we take away from this? I want to talk about some of the takeaways from some of the practical tips that I've talked about and how we can implement those. But I think scaling DBT in hypergrowth or moving very quickly requires thinking outside of the box. So those are a few things that I've talked about. I'm sure there are numerous more that can be helpful, especially in a time like we're in right now where we have to think about efficiency and we have to think about costs and we have to think about data integrity and data accuracy. Those are all really, really important things. So how can we allow ourselves to think more about those things and think less about the menial tasks that require manual work, those types of things. So building the foundation for growth, reducing the tech debt later on, talked about that a little bit. Focusing on pain points and spending time solving the problems that are impactful and help us to move from being a cost center as a data team, which they naturally are, to a growth engine, which we hope they can be one day. So I think those are all really important things to talk about and some tips that help us to understand those types of things. So those are great next steps and things that can help us to iterate a little bit quicker in a lot of the things that we talk about. So thanks. I would love to connect. Feel free to add me on LinkedIn, shoot me a message, and can go from there. But